He joins us every single week. It is Michael-Shawn Dugar. We like to call it the Dugar Report. It's all brought to you by Georgetown Brewery. Of course, he's writes for The Athletic. He's got a story up there today about DK Metcalf, along with Diana Rossini, that we're going to get to it in a second. Co-host of the Seahawks Man-to-Man podcast with our guy, Chris Kidd. Again, brought to you by Georgetown's Tavern Beer. Their brand new beer, easy drinking, domestic style lager, made with Pacific Northwest barley and Yakima Valley hops, 4.2%, brewed by our good friends at Georgetown Brewery, makers of Manny's Pale Ale and Bodhisattva IPA. And Michael-Shawn Dugar joins us from the Limback Lumber Studios. Mike, thank you for doing it as always. Let's jump right into it. Your report that you had out that came out yesterday along some of your colleagues at The Athletic, including Diana Rossini, saying that the Seahawks asking price is a first and a third. That would mirror what the Titans received from A.J. Brown. What's kind of the latest on that front, Mike?
Honestly, that Diana had it this morning, and that really sounded like to me we don't want to trade him asking price, which makes sense. Like, yeah, let's set it high, blow us away if we're gonna give you our 27-year-old outside receiver who's like basically you can write in ink 900 yards and like 4 or 5 touchdowns a year. At 27, I think he turns 28 in December. A guy who's a hard worker, all this good stuff. Like, yeah, if you want that, go ahead, blow us away. Otherwise, we are not like inclined to give him away. You look at John Snyder doesn't have a long track record of just like giving away premier talent, which is good. You don't want to have a track record of that. But you look at the times that he has done it, whether it's Russ or Frank Clark, like John got good compensation back in both instances. I didn't like the Russ compensation in real time, but John proved to be a little smarter than me, at least in that instance. And I think DK is going to be the same. Like, yeah, why wouldn't you start with, give us your first, especially if you're a team in the back half of the first round. Give us your first. Give us pick 25 if you're Houston, 22 if you're the Chargers. I don't think that they'll get any of those. But yeah, that's a price that says we don't need to do anything. We don't need to give him up. So that's kind of how I read that.
What do you think led to him coming out yesterday and he and his agent demanding a trade?
First, disregard for Tyler Lockett. That would be one. I felt so bad. He just stepped all over that announcement. You see, just from the Seahawks Twitter, socials account, they had all of this like pre-recorded Tyler Lockett content, just kind of send him off. They had his highlights. They had a whole video sit down of all the people talking about how much they love him. And it was like, nope, DK's day. But anyway, the second thing, I mean, Puck, this really all comes back to money for me. Really, we've seen guys ask for trades and then stay where the hell they at, and overlook all the reasons they gave up that trade when they get the bag. We
100%.
just watched Brandon Ayuk do it. We saw Budda Baker do it with the Cardinals. Gave him a new contract after he axed out. And these are public asks too, so you deal with your fan base knowing you didn't want to be here either, and all of your teammates versus privately doing it, which is a totally different level of trade request in my mind. Like when you tell your teammates, like, "Yo, I don't want to be with y'all no more." Now you have to deal with that. What helps you deal with that? Millions and millions of dollars.
Money solves anything, Mike.
Yeah, all them reasons that you say, maybe I don't like the training room. Maybe I'm tired of the quarterback. Maybe I'm tired of losing. What helps you deal with losing? $30 million a year.
Yeah, I'm with you. I always money doesn't buy you happiness. Okay, I agree to a point, but there is a point where money does provide happiness. All right.
Well, what, Puck, my amendment to that statement is usually, money can maybe not buy happiness, but it can make you happier. And that's really all most of us are seeking. It's like, right. It's always the pursuit of happiness. Like, can I just get happier than I currently am? Yeah. And you know what'll make DK happy, I'm sure, is $120 million over 4 years,
What do you think is, let me just ask you, you cover him and you cover the team. Do you think he will be traded?
Ooh, that's a good one. I've been struggling with this all morning. My guess would be yes. Because I lean towards yes as of last night when I lean towards no. Because I do think that John would feel like he can recoup. Like he can do this. Like he can get a good player. He can fix the team without, like, we don't need DK to be successful. Do I agree with that assessment? No, I do not. But that would be my guess. Because, like I said, with Russ and with Frank, like it's kind of the same thing. It didn't make sense to really get rid of either of those guys because of what you had on the roster at the time. Like Geno wasn't even on the roster at the time. You traded Russ, you just only get Drew Lock back. That seemed nuts. You had no pass rushers really on the edge when you get rid of Frank, and kind of still didn't, for years and years and years. But John felt he could do it. Felt he could replace him. So that's where I lean right now. Puck, honestly, if you ask me tomorrow after I talk to some more people, that could probably change. I personally,
and it's okay if it changes, right? Everyone can change.
Well, I wouldn't even do it to be honest.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. Just because
you personally wouldn't do it.
Nah, I just feel like if you really want to win and you're trying to sell that, it's a hard sell for me. Honestly, it's a hard sell to say you want to win with how the roster is anyway. If you keep DK, I think it just gets a lot tougher if you do that. That's kind of my outlook on it.
Do you think their line, if they do trade him, Mike, their line of thinking is, because they've spent this entire offseason, right? We need to get, and Schneider talked about it, I think, at the Combine. We need to get back to where we were. And that's being physical, aggressive defense. The crowd at home is loud. We need that home field advantage back. We need to run the ball. Well, I mean, you go back in their heyday of those teams, right? They didn't have an elite wide receiver. And I know that's disrespectful to Doug and to Jermaine and to Golden, but they weren't considered elite. They're, good. Baldwin's very good. And do they look at that model and say, listen, that's how we want to play, and investing $30 million in a guy that plays wide receiver is not who we want to be?
Yeah, no, I think that would be like really idiotic on the Seahawks part. I just, I do, because I don't think like paying wide receivers and running the ball well are mutually exclusive, like team building strategies. We literally just saw the Philadelphia Eagles, who have two receivers making over $25 million a year, also employ the rushing champ, who was not on a rookie deal. Like, that's important too, because if they had just drafted the rushing champ on a 4th round contract, whatever, that'd be harder to replicate. No, they paid the rushing champ, just paid him again, had a good old line that they were paying, and paid receivers and paid their quarterback at the same time. And all of that is doable as long as your owner has cash on hand, which the Allen family does. So I just think that you don't have to separate the two. You can have DK, you can have Jackson Smith and Jigba, and you can give Ken Walker the ball. And you can pay all of these people. You can pay Geno, you can pay DK. You're really only paying one receiver at that point, would just be DK. Pay Geno. You're not paying anyone on the offensive line. Everyone currently is on a rookie contract. You're not really paying some of your best defenders, honestly, outside of Leonard Williams and Jay Love. So yeah, I don't think it has to be excluded. I think if that's the lesson that the Seahawks take away, like if John and the building are circling that, I think everyone should go. Like that's the wrong lesson to take away, I think, from when their last championship team.
What do you think that if we don't believe, and I agree with you, I don't think a first and a third is likely, but I don't know. I can look at AJ Brown and go, well, if AJ Brown got that, I could see maybe DK getting it. AJ Brown was younger, wasn't on the second or third deal that DK is going to be on. Does it fall in line more with what DeAndre Hopkins got? What the Cardinals had to give up to go get Hopkins. I guess it's hard to always judge the trades, right? Because they're not equal all the time, and you don't know what a team's willing to give up. A first round pick could be a late first round pick, which is and again, all first round picks aren't equal. Your best guess though would be what you think for him.
Yeah, so I think the closest thing I found to a comp, at least under this current CBA, is the Stephon Diggs deal that sent him to Buffalo. So Diggs at the time was on a second-round contract. Not second-round contract, his second deal. He had already got extended by Minnesota, so he wasn't on the rookie deal. So he was going into, I believe, his age 27 season. I think Diggs has a November birthday. DK is 27 currently, turns 28 in December. Their production over the last 2 seasons prior to getting traded was about the same. Diggs' last 2 years in Minnesota, DK's last 2 years in Seattle. I think that's the closest thing. The reason that Diggs got a first-round pick from Buffalo, which I think was the 22nd pick in that draft, is because he had multiple years of team control. So I guess I would scale back the first-round pick because you really only get one with DK. And something in the high second, like you get him to a bad team in the second round, and then you add day 3 picks on top of that. That would be probably fair. I don't think the Seahawks would do that, but I think that would be what's fair per se.
What about the Raiders' second round pick at 37 and what, a fourth round pick or a third round pick?
Yeah, so a story we have on the Athletic right now is I had my colleagues at the over there with me send in offers as if they were the GM. I think we got one from the Chargers,
Oh,
Bills,
okay.
Patriots, Steelers. Everyone, I think I 7 offers. I play GM,
I love
and
it.
I go accept them. And then they all had to submit, if they wanted to, contract offers as well, because that matters too. You can't just give the trade compensation Seattle wants. You also have to pay DK, and he has to be willing to go play for your team. So everyone had to factor that in and send me over offers. Our Raiders offer, which is why I'm bringing this up, was a second round pick in this draft, which is 37. They got next year third round pick, and then they're willing to give DK, I think, $31 million a year,
Okay.
which is what he wants. I think that's honestly, I probably, if I'm John Snyder, I'm probably still not doing that. However,
Okay.
if you are going to do it, that's probably the best you're going to get. It's basically the inverse or something very similar of the Dwayne Brown trade that they gave Houston, which was like a 2 and a 3 in consecutive drafts. So not the same draft. That's probably the best you're going to get. That satisfies DK, gets you back with Pete, gets him the bag, and then you get Seattle something where they can maybe say, oh, we can get an impact player with pick 37.
And that's all up at The Athletic right now. If you're not a subscriber, go subscribe to The Athletic, athletic.com. Michael-Shawn Dugar's piece up there with his colleagues at The Athletic, and we're sharing it on the screen. The Raiders' second-round pick this year, and then a third-round pick next year, and then a contract. You also list Kansas City on there. I'll be honest with you. I don't need to see him in Kansas City with Andy Reid.
Well,
I don't need to see that.
I do think though, selfishly, I'm not a Seahawks fan, so I'd be like, whatever, that'd be
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
But I do think that if we're gonna talk about where he would go, the AFC, if the Seahawks are gonna trade him, would be like far and away the ideal scenario. And not to say that he can't go to the NFC, but like John's not no dummy, man. He's been doing this for a long time. You want to avoid if you're giving away like premier players, not like uh they gave up the Bears like got Joe Tooney or whatever. Joe Tooney's like 32 or whatever the hell. Like even if they had sent him to the AFC, Kansas City, you're probably not too worried about like seeing a left guard in your conference or whatever. But man, you got to see DK because you know you're sending him to a team that probably could be a contender, and you want to be one. So you avoid sending him to Green Bay, Washington, who I don't think sent me an offer, or maybe they did. I can't remember. But I think the AFC would be the preferred spot. You know, I don't think it's a coincidence that that's where Russ went. That's where Frank Clark went. You know,
Right.
you don't want to have to just keep seeing the dude, you know, that you gave up, particularly if he's a skill guy. I think that would be part of the math as well. It's part of why teams don't trade within a division. Typically, you don't want to have to keep seeing this cat, you know, especially if you know he's a good player. So honestly though, Puck, you know, I'm gonna think about this morning. I don't know if I even trust the current like setup to really get this right. You know, to be a contender, whether you keep DK or not, I'm just kind of losing faith the more and more
You're
I look
losing
at this.
faith in
Honestly,
John Schneider.
the whole thing though, because he doesn't scout alone. You know, for instance, they employ Steve Hutchinson to look at their O linemen. They have for years. Does that seem like that's paying off at all? You know, I was thinking that when John talked about at the combine, he was like, yeah, it's going to help that we have these guys who have been evaluating offensive linemen and developing them at a high level for years. He was referring to John Benton and some of the other run game guys that are on Clint Kubiak's staff. And I was like, okay, maybe that helps. But it's like, you guys have also had one of the best we've seen evaluating too, and that hasn't helped. You know, I just think that I'm not really a big fan of the people who necessitate the rebuild being part of the fix. You know what I mean? Like if you were part of the problem, generally I'm not a big like be part of the solution. That's in any sport. Typically, you could apply that across whatever team sport you want. Not to say you can't fix it, but man, I just have a lot of faith. I lack faith, I should say, Puck, particularly if the philosophy has not changed. The philosophy that led to us being in this position has not shifted. Why should I think that you're just suddenly just going to get better at the thing you weren't good at to get us in this position, you know?
I've always wondered about the Hutchinson thing. I just can't. I don't understand it. He was so good, so good. And like for people who don't know, I mean, he's been with the organization for, I mean, a while. Maybe you know the exact
Yeah.
years, but
I don't know the exact,
while.
but it's years, multiple draft classes and
in,
stuff. Yeah.
in charge of looking at offensive linemen. And maybe it's the old thing, Mike. You know, it's like the NBA sometimes. Maybe the guys who are really good just aren't good at finding talent. Because maybe it just came naturally to Steve Hutchinson. I don't know, but he hasn't been able to find any, as long as he's been there and been in charge of kind of evaluating these offensive linemen, they've just been poor at it. So, yeah, that's always been a great mystery to me.
Me too, Puck. Me too, And I will say this for John, not the only, his O-line's probably the worst position his staff has drafted at over the last 15 years. Oh. Receiver might be his best, I would say. I'd really have to dive into that. Maybe DB, but I wouldn't lump all DBs in one bucket. I would separate corners and safeties. But yeah, if you were to do that, receiver, where you got Tate, where you got Lockett, where you got DK, I think that's probably
you didn't draft Baldwin, but you signed him.
Yeah,
right. Baldwin and Curse, right? They both were undrafted free agents, right?
Rookie agents. And then P. Rich was probably a little too high, but he had injury issues it wasn't as much of a talent thing. But yeah, I think that's probably his best spot. Like if you were going to trust him to replace something, maybe that would be it. JSN, I can't believe how we forgot him, but the year Doug retired, they took 3 receivers in the draft. DK was one of them. John Arsua was the other. Gary Jennings was the other. Now that's 3 swings, obviously, but you got DK out of it, so that was immediate Doug replacement, so to speak. So I guess I should say that for John, if I poo-poo on some of the other stuff they've done, that is perhaps the only position I trust him to find the new guy right away.
Well, then draft, and then of course this year I think is right. The consensus is this class is down for receivers.
Yeah, that is. But the more I've looked at these guys, it really is. I feel this way about quarterback too, outside of Cam Ward. It really just depends on what you are looking for. Like if you're looking for a number 1 guy, like if you're the Panthers and you're like, we need a number 1 receiver. No, this is probably not the draft class for you. But if you're the Cowboys, if you are the Seahawks in the event of a DK trade, if you're the Commanders, even after this Debo trade, you need a number 2 to complement the guy you got. I think this draft is full of those guys. And that's what you should be looking for anyway, outside of the first round.
I'm kind of with you on that one. Like is it the number 1 freak guy? Probably not, but
no.
And maybe you and I are going to be homers on this one. But when I look at like the big board for wide receivers and I see how far down like Kyle Williams is, and I go, that guy he's going to be a solid pro. He just will be. I think he'll play in the league for a long time. I mean, he's not a number 1 guy, but man, he's certainly good enough to be in the league for damn near 10 years, making an impact, I think.
And yeah, I agree. I actually just texted one of my friends who's a Houston Texans fan. I was like, because, all their receivers' knees just went to hell this last offseason, unfortunately. Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs just couldn't, by New Year's Day, neither one of them could walk. So I was like, oh, they need a receiver. I'm like, don't worry. You don't got to take the Missouri kid in the first round. You can if you want. But I would take a lineman and I would just go take Kyle Williams, man. Like he separates and he's got good hands. That's where I feel like we look at some of the, like you mentioned, like the freak stuff. We want AJ Browns and DKs and whatever, Megatrons or, even like the receiver equivalent of a Kyle Pitts, who's like big, strong, fast. Yeah. But my thing when I'm looking at receivers, do you separate from your guy? And do you have good hands? I can work with pretty much everything else. And if you're just going to be a contested catch guy, which I do think there's value, you better be the best at that. I would have took Drake London, for instance. Like he goes up and gets the ball at a very high level, even though he does not separate from his guys, but he's got the good hands. George Pickens, same thing. Like he's kind of a nut job, but like when that ball is in the air, George is going to go get it, even if he has to catch it upside down, So like if you're looking for specific things in receivers, I think this is your class. If you're a team who's like, we need a number 1 guy who's going to like be offensive player of the year type caliber, our Justin Jefferson. No, you're probably going to swing and miss. But if you just need a number 2, you need a Jordan Addison. Yeah, I think this draft has Jordan Addisons. It has those number 2 type of. It has Jalen Waddles. I know this is the first round pick, but I think it has the number 2 guy if that's what your team needs, and that's what Seattle would need in this instance.
You wrote about in that piece where you had all the your colleagues put in the draft picks there or the trade scenarios for DK. Ultimately, you wrote at the end of it, you think he goes to
Las Vegas. I sent him to Vegas in that deal. I think that was by far the best deal that allows you to kind of get an impact player. Again, I wouldn't do it, but if you give me pick 37, you look at like what you can get in that range, you can expect with pick 37, you probably could get the highest graded player at insert position here on your board. That's not a quarterback. Typically, like depending on the year, you might be able to get, hey, he was the highest graded left tackle on our board. That's rare, but you could do it. You might be able to get the highest graded safety, the highest graded linebacker. You shouldn't take the highest graded running back, but you can. That's like where Ken Walker went. Boye, D Hall. There's a lot of examples of like, all right, we can get an impact player with that spot. Teams offering me a third rounder. I was like, I might be lucky if that dude make the team, depending on who he is. So yeah, top 40 pick and a pick next year. If the Raiders go to hell, that pick's a little higher. Yeah, that's where I ended up going. I still wouldn't do that if I was a Seahawks, but I mean, for the sake of the exercise, that was easily the best offer.
What about Geno? What do you think happens with Geno Smith? Do you think ultimately the percentages say that he reworks a deal, reworks a deal extension in Seattle? Do they actively shop him? Garofolo saying that he knows the teams have called him. He knows specifically one team that's called. And again, that's not anything out of the ordinary in the NFL or in sports. Teams call about players all the time. There's always a great story about the Bulls. I think it was the Utah president or GM called Jerry Krause every year about Michael Jordan. What do you want from Michael Jordan? And knowing what the answer was going to be. But what do you think ultimately here in the next few weeks when it's deciding, right? He's got that deadline is March 16th for that bonus. Do you think a decision happens before then about the future of Geno Smith?
Yeah, this one's tough too. My guess would be that knowing what Geno feels about himself as a quarterback and how the Seahawks have kind of structured his last deal, which said a lot about how they felt about him. I could see them being kind of far apart, like the Rams and Stafford were. Like, it sounds like Stafford walked in there and said, "Yo, I'm worth 50 million," and they said, "Oh, you think that, huh? All right, go out there and see if that's what you get." And he didn't. I think the Raiders offered him like 45 million a year, which was still more than the Rams were offering. I see a very similar scenario where Geno guy come in and like, "Oh, hey, if Kirk Cousins is making $45 million a year, what you think my guy is worth, right, around the same age and better?" And then I can see John being like, "You know what, you're right. But you go out there and see if that's what you get on the open market." Because that's really what, and this, Puck, when you're negotiating an extension, you're negotiating against an hypothetical free market, not an actual free market, a hypothetical one. That's why the Rams went out there and said, "Hell, you want a free market? Go out there. Let's see." And came back and didn't get anything worth a damn. I could see a similar scenario with Geno, where they're so far apart that maybe he does want to just play this out. I'm sure he likes security, but I don't know where the middle ground would be. I predict if they do extend him, maybe you get a $40 million a year deal, but that doesn't even have Geno like in the top 10. I could see Geno just playing out that deal reluctantly, unfortunately.
Let's say, and again, according at least how Mike Garofolo feels, and I'm curious, and I'll ask you the same question. You feel they will trade DK? Do you think he thinks it happens quickly? You share that sentiment?
Yeah, I think if it's going to happen, it happens by next Wednesday.
Okay.
I do. I think that's kind of like an unofficial deadline for it, because after that, money dries up. Teams make other moves at receiver,
And just remind me and people, that's when the league year starts officially, correct?
Correct. Yeah, the tampering, negotiating window, whatever, starts on Monday morning. But by Wednesday, that's when all these deals that we're hearing will become official, and that's when the official league year will start. Yes.
Okay, so let's talk through this. If you trade DK, why would you extend Geno Smith? What's the point of it?
Good question. I think that Geno should be viewed independent of what happens at receiver. He should be viewed relative to what else you would do at quarterback if you didn't. Like, that's kind of how I view his market. Because you're extending Geno because, one, you would think he was a good player, and two, you don't have a better option if you don't. That's kind of how I would view that. Who he's throwing to comes to a very distant third in that, because I think the protection is far more important. We've clearly seen that you could give him great receivers and it won't go great if he's on his ass, because his guards are getting walked backwards. So I would focus more on the QB market when viewing Geno. That's why you would still extend him if you think he's a good player. You extend him because you think the veteran quarterback market sucks. You extend him because you don't like a Jackson Dart, Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe, Shador Sanders, whatever. Like, you extend him for those reasons. Because you feel like not only is this veteran market terrible, we don't even think that we could get like a potential successor in this draft class. So let's go ahead and invest in Geno for at least 2 more years. Those are the most important ways to view Geno. I think who he throws to, whether he throws to DK, is kind of whatever. Because I think Geno with protection he could spin it to me and you for a touchdown puck if he's got long enough in the pocket.
Mike, I can't get open. There's just Mike. I play basketball on Monday nights, Mike. It's Thursday. It's Thursday at 11:15. I'm going to get out of this chair in about 15 minutes, and you're going to hear my hips crack. I can't move. I can't move, and it's 3 days later. I cannot move.
I hear you. That's a fair question, though. I think a lot of Seahawks fans are wondering that. Like, should we just blow it up if we're going to get rid of
because aren't you
DK?
rebuilding? And I love how everyone thinks it's so negative. See, I think I push back on those who claim they aren't rebuilding. Now, you fired your entire staff and went with a whole new coaching staff. That you are rebuilding in a sense, because there's no way a new staff was going to come in right away and then like 11, 12 wins and we're in the Super Bowl. That wasn't going to happen. So I guess I would wonder to them if they were already going to trade DK, aren't you admitting that we're taking a step back this year? We have to.
In theory, yes, but I don't think so. That's why I brought up how John felt the last time, because you could have made that argument trading Russ. And it was like, okay. And they just did not want to call that a rebuild. They were like, we still feel like we can win. I probably thought that they could win with like Drew Lock. That was probably their thought. Actually, not probably. That was their thought, because they didn't sign Geno for like another month. Right. Now, should that have been the thought? Heavens no. But it was, like first what we think should be the case versus how they're operating internally tends to be very different. I think trading DK is probably a sense of like, okay, we're going to take a step back here. But I would have made that same argument when they traded Frank ahead of the 2019 draft, and instead they ended up going into the divisional round of the playoffs.
I don't think this. I don't think you think this. Do you think that they think, and I just said think about 10 times there, that they can win with Sam Howell in this system?
If you'd asked me this last year, I would say yes. I think that the eye in the sky doesn't lie. And you could love Sam more than your own children, but you cannot watch that Green Bay game and just be convinced you got something there. You just can't. I asked John that at the combine. I said, do you see Sam as a starter? He said, I really want to see him in Clint's new offense. We didn't get a chance to. And that was John's nice way of saying no. No.
Okay, that's what you read it that way then. That's because that was the quote. That was the quote I was thinking of. Because he wants to see, I would like to see him in this offense, and he wasn't healthy, and I don't like the offense he was in. It was straight drop back. We don't want to see him on the move. You took it as no, he's not good.
Not at least not currently. He's got if you still have to see it after he's already been in your building, that's probably a no. Because he wasn't good in that Green Bay game, and I think I'm projecting here on John's part, but we've now seen multiple instances of the backup quarterback kind of come in cold in Seattle and play better than Sam did. Geno came in cold for us and was fine. He wasn't like a world beater, but he came in 98-yard drive on the eventual Super Bowl champs. We've seen Drew Lock come in and play better than Sam did in multiple instances. And then even when Drew got a chance to start, he walked the Eagles down on Monday Night Football. We've seen similar quarterbacks come in the instance that Sam did, and no one looked as bad as Sam. And I know John can just not ignore that with a straight face.
This could be just a monumental offseason for this organization when you think about it, right? You trade DK, which you and Garofalo think is likely, more likely than not to happen and happen fast. Obviously, Tyler Lockett's gone. He's been released. And I don't think that any of us can certainly, with 100% certainty, agree or have a take that Geno Smith is back. I mean, think about the offensive changes to this team from a year ago, what we could see potentially as we start the season in 2025. You can see all three of those guys gone. Hell, I joked with Garofalo. I mean, it's probably not going to happen, but you could see all three of them in the Raiders.
Yeah. You could see a big old Raider reunion or Seattle reunion in Las Vegas with DK there, Tyler there, Bobby Wagner there. I don't think Russ would go there. But like everyone else, I think could link up in the desert. And that's why I got to the losing faith thing. Like all the math you just did in your head right there to talk about how big the offseason is.
For me.
I did that this morning and I was like, why do I trust anyone here to dig out of this? That's the thought that I have, and some of that comes to free agency.
Sure.
I think John and those guys were working with about $45 million in cap space at some point after they shed, all those contracts last year, got rid of Quandre, got rid of Jamal, cleared some cap space with some other guys. They were not penny pinching. Look what they brought back. A bunch of dudes who are not on the team and shouldn't be on the team. That's what worries me. It really does feel like a reset is needed. I felt like that last year. My only thing that gives me confidence, because I'm going to just pour a bunch of negativity onto your show. But I do
Wait a minute. People are used to it. Go ahead.
I'm trying. I just try to be real with the audience.
Not from you. But
well, I think we do that. We pour a lot of cold water on our Seahawks Man to Man podcast too, because we don't want to lie to the audience to sell them hope in March. We want people listening to us to feel like we're telling them honestly what we think based on what I'm hearing or film we're watching. It's hard for me to do that sometimes. I'll watch film of a guy who stinks that they signed in free agency. I'm just like, I want to get in the audience and be like, oh no, he could be all right if ABC. I'm gonna tell him, nah, man.
It's just honest evaluation, though. That's what it should be. All right, you want to end on a positive note. That positive note is what?
I think that Mike McDonald's gonna be a really good head coach in the NFL. Like, I think that he's, of all the things that I can critique John and his guys for doing the last whatever years, I think they got that right. I think they got hiring Mike McDonald right. I think he's the type of guy who can, for instance, but John was talking about like they got to be better at their evals at O-line. And I was like, okay, what do you got to change? He was like, we got to be better at scouting the person. And he gave one of those John Schneider word salad answers that, if you really boil it down, is we need guys who are going to handle adversity better. Basically, like what happens when you're not the best athlete up front, like you were in the SEC or whatever? What happens when you get benched for a second? What happens when you have to go through an injury? How are you going to respond? They got to find the better person. And I bring that up to say they got that with Mike. Mike is going to handle a 3-game losing streak without, going crazy, scolding people, losing locker room, changing everything out of panic. No, Mike's a stick to the. He's got a philosophy, but he's also pliable when necessary. He'll change a travel schedule. He'll change the practice schedule. He'll go spend more time on special teams for a week and deviate from his normal schedule if that's what warrants. He'll punt on a special teamer who keeps fumbling. Kickoff returns. He's pliable, but has a strong foundation. And I think that he can weather a storm as a head coach. I don't know if he'll get the roster around him to do it, but that is the one thing I think that if you're a Seahawks fan, you're like doom and gloom. It's March 5th or whatever, 6th. Everything, the sky is falling. I think Mike McDonald's the type of guy who can weather a storm. I genuinely believe that.
Hey, real quick before we let you go, just give our audience an update on Ernest Jones, the surgery, and then what do you think about his about getting a deal done right when the league opens up?
Wow, that was quite the chain of events there. Where it's funny. I get a little background here. I don't usually do this, but so I saw Bob Condotta's report that the Ernest had off-season surgery. I'm not going to question Bob's sources. I'm sure that was 100% accurate, right? But just so I have my own, I sent it to one of Ernest's agents. This is after it had been up for hours, and they didn't. I was like, hey, can you just confirm this? Sent him a screenshot of Bob's story. It didn't respond, but immediately went to Twitter and was like, hey, yo, you guys are framing this a certain way. Our guy, the surgery was a good thing. Like, what's going on here? So I found that very interesting that was because that happened like 2 minutes after I sent the text. And I just thought that their gripe being the framing was kind of interesting. I thought that felt very like two sides in the middle of a negotiation type of thing where it's like, oh man, the guy had knee surgery. Maybe we should pay him a little less. And they hop on like, yo, whoa. The knee surgery got him better.
Yeah, he's fabulous now.
Yeah, you know how everybody's at training camp puck. I feel like I'm back in my 20s. The greatest shape I've ever been in. That's across sports. Anyway, I bring that up to say that told me that the negotiations are probably not going as smooth as we would like. You usually don't leak things about a guy having a surgery, right? when you're confident in paying him whatever. So that was a red flag for me. I would still imagine a deal gets done because if Ernest does hit the open market, for better or worse, teams are going to be worried about your knee. And if they can't get you a physical and get guys, their doctors to get a hand on you, maybe they don't pay you 14, 15 million or whatever you're looking for. So I do think a deal gets done either Monday or Tuesday of next week, but that was a red flag for me. What happened yesterday with Bob's report, his agent's reaction to it, public reaction to it, didn't just call John and yell, or call Bob and yell. He was like, let me hop on Twitter and do this. Yeah. And Ernest's reply to a fan that I saw this morning that lamented his knee injury. And Ernest was like, well, my knee wasn't a problem when I came here and fixed the defense. I'm paraphrasing, but Ernest did tweet that. So yeah, that lets me know things are not going super well. But I don't think things have to go super well the whole time for teams to get to the finish line.
Yeah.
You know, I've heard of agents and cap guys screaming at each other, top of their lungs, motherfucking each other, and then they get a deal done. Like that happened when like Russ's guys, you know, cuss them out all he wants, but then Russ would become like the second highest paid quarterback in the league. So I think something gets done. I think Ernest probably gets paid like a fringe top 10 inside linebacker, which he is, in my opinion. But it does seem like it got a little messy here, and it probably will be messy until next week.
All right. That was a good lot of packed with a lot of information there, Mike. Michael-Shawn Dugar from The Athletic. Go check all of his work up at The Athletic, including trade scenarios for DK Metcalf. He believes like Garofalo trade is going to happen with DK, thinks it's going to happen to the Raiders, and thinks it's going to happen quickly. Well, I shouldn't say thinks it's going to go to the Raiders. Of the trade scenarios that was presented in the piece, that would be the most likely
I do think for what it's worth, Puck, he would probably they would be the most they're the combination of like desperate plus familiarity.
I got you.
I think that they would pay $30 million for DK because you think about it, $30 million for DK, depending on how your roster looks, he's probably your highest paid player, and if not, he's probably your highest paid offensive player. And teams, you got to be worried about doing that. Seahawks made that mistake with Percy Harvin, made him the highest paid guy. He hadn't played a snap.
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
teams are scared of doing that generally, unless you got Pete Carroll in the building and you can speak to DK's at the person. Right. And I think that's why they're the ideal fit that everyone is projecting.
And give us the latest Seahawks Man-to-Man podcast.
Yes, we just did a mock free agency, kind of trying to fix the Seahawks well within the budget. We did that with the homie Derek Klassen, one of our national writers, a big film nerd, so he knows what he's talking about. That's up now. It's called Big Game Hunting, up on all podcast platforms. We're going to do a free agency episode next week. I want to see how things filter out. We don't have an emergency DK episode quite yet. I want to work the phones a little bit more before I speak on that definitively. But yeah, we got that up now, and then next week we'll do our free agency show.
Great stuff, Mike. We'll talk next week.
All right, Puck. Appreciate you having me.